All right. Well, we left off in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, known as the faith chapter. And we've been talking about faith as of late. So I think we're starting off now in verse 13. Hebrews 11:13. It says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their Father, for he has prepared a city for them. So, I had just a couple of questions popped into my head while I was working on this. The first question is faith contagious? Kind of like the COVID, huh? A lot more rewarding. I agree.
With like-minded people and you fellowship and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their stories and just, I think it is.
Yeah, I don't think the saving faith obviously is from God, but that little mustard seed of faith that God gives us, has so much potential. And part of that growth potential involves being with like-minded people of faith. And so when we see the faith in others, I think it does encourage us. It gives us hope, which creates more faith. The more faith we have, the more hope we have. And the more hope we have, the more faith we have, right? So, I love encouraging people. When people are encouraging. I remember one person who was so encouraging to me. I know only a few of you might remember him. And that was an older guy by the name of Frank Dunn. Remember Frank Dunn? Little guy, well into his 90s. And, I'd come by here in the morning and start working, and there would be a knock at the door. And honestly, I would always get kind of a little bit mad because I thought, I'm here early. Who's up this early, right? And, I just wanted to work. I just need to be left alone to work, or I'm not going to get it done. So I'm always kind of antsy like that. And hear a knock at the door, so okay, here I go. And sure enough, there's Frank Dunn. Pastor, I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to take 1 minute just to pray with you this morning. And you know what, man? I needed that prayer so badly, you have no idea. And he would pray for me, and I'd pray for him, and I'd say, Frank, you're my angel. You're my angel. And he loved hearing that. What a sweet guy he was,
What was that song you always sang?
There's room at the cross. Millions have come, but there's still room for one. There's room at the cross for you. That was his favorite song. And, Anyway. So, he would motivate me. I'd start off with kind of a, grouchy day, and, man, when he left, man, I felt so great. And I thought, Lord, why am I so grouchy, and then I'm going into work with a good attitude, right? My next question is, why is faith so important when God's will be done anyway? We're always told to be faithful and have faith, and it's like, well,
you want to be part of it, or you want to be a bystander?
wow. I don't think I could have answered it any better myself. Did everybody hear that? You want to be part of it, or you just want to, you want to be a bystander? Don't we all want to be part of something big? I know the Southern Baptist Convention is having problems right now. Hopefully they'll not only survive, but come out of this stronger than ever before, hopefully. But we are part of something infinitely bigger than ourselves. Number one, we are part of the only legitimate religion on the face of this earth. I mean, when we look at the coming of Christ and the virgin birth, the miracle of the virgin birth, his crucifixion, his resurrection. When we look at the whole thing, it's just amazing to realize that because of who Jesus is and what he did, he negated the legitimacy of every other religion on the face of the earth. You know, the others are nothing. You know, the only thing they are is satanic, okay? So we're part of that. And number two, we're part of the largest denomination in the world. Maybe not the best. Sometimes, you know, I like what this group does, or I like what that group does, or what that group does. Sometimes I don't like what maybe our group does. But you know something? We're still part of the biggest denomination on the face of the earth. And we have more missionaries around the world than any other group. We have the largest missions board. And that's why a lot of times people from other faith groups actually leave and join Southern Baptists because they want to be part of something infinitely bigger than themselves. You know, they want to be out there where the action is. And that's what we do. That's why we don't have visiting missionaries giving reports, because we supply them with enough money to stay in the field and do their job and not have to leave for 6 months, then go back and start all over again what they already had done, you know. I mean, it's just it's a miserable thing. So yeah, we're part of something great. We really are. And so if anybody ever asks you what you are, tell them that you are a Jesus follower. That's the most important thing. Number two, they say, well, what kind of Jesus follower are you? Tell them that you're a Bible-believing Jesus follower. Then if they ask you, well, what kind of a Bible-believing Jesus follower are you? Then you could say, well, doctrinally, I'm a Baptist, or I belong to a Baptist church. And so you primarily agree with those doctrines, but you're not going to agree with everything, are you? Yeah. I mean, I like, you know, I think everybody's got something good going for them, or they wouldn't be here, right? Okay. So yeah, we want to be part of it. We want to be in on it. God doesn't need us. He can do everything infinitely better himself. But yet he loves us so much that he chooses to include us. It's a big deal. Do you have your hand up?
I was just about to. I mean, you know, we are his children. And, you know, I think he wants us to be obedient. I mean, I think obedience comes a lot to play with it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, he can do it all himself, but I don't think that that's what he wants to do.
Right, because if he doesn't want us to, you know, be faithful, you know, to reciprocate the faith that he's given us, then there's no relationship. So, yeah, I agree. Okay, well, in verses 17 through 16, it summarizes the characteristic excellencies of the patriarchs' faith. Although they had not actually seen or experienced the good things they were promised, their faith remained steadfast until death. And especially in their dying hour, they were still just as faithful then as they were from the beginning. Yeah, because God made a seed promise, right? And when you plant a seed, it doesn't sprout the next day. You know, it takes time to sprout. It takes time to come through the earth. You know, it has to be cultivated and watered and nurtured, and you can maybe wait quite a long time before you start getting fruit, right? And so he made a seed promise, and that's what circumcision is about. I think I'm going to mention that briefly here, but circumcision, it's not like the greatest topic to sit here and talk about tonight. I didn't bring any pictures or anything like that, but
It's a good thing.
yeah. But it was a reminder to every male Jew of God's promise that one is coming, that he promised all the way back in the garden, that one is going to come and bruise his heel, but in the process he's going to crush the head of the serpent. And that seed promise, we see it followed all the way through the scriptures, right? Through the prophecies into the New Testament. So, that was another question I was going to ask too. Would you sacrifice and have a really, really hard life and sacrifice for a future promise that maybe your great, 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 great grandchildren will get? I mean,
Abraham did.
yeah, well, they all did here, kind of in a way. They all sacrificed. So they all,
Saints too, that's the reason why.
yeah, yeah, we're saints too, technically, but I think God blessed them anyway. They were people. They had lives like we do. He blessed them in His way. He gave them, I think, through their life, the affirmation they needed. Again, they were part of something infinitely bigger, just like we're still part of something infinitely bigger, to come. Abel, Enoch, nor Noah was part of the Abrahamic covenant, but there were other promises made and repeated, such again as the seed of the woman shall bruise the serpent's head. I just said that. Or as Jacob stated in Genesis 49:18, I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. So he knew that someone was going to come and bring them salvation, right? The antediluvians knew of a promised one, but they couldn't really embrace someone that was still so distant. The concept was welcome, though. They welcomed that concept that there's going to be someone coming. God's people have always been pilgrims or sojourners of this world, looking for a country to call their own. This is not our world. I think years ago, I did a sermon entitled Our Heavenly Citizenship, and I talked about citizenship, because we have a relative, right, who did not ever make his citizenship, and one thing led to another, and he got caught. This was after 9/11 when they got really strict. Got deported, right? Didn't speak any any German. He was basically raised here, and had to go to school twice over there just to figure out how to talk right and read and write, And he is,
No, when he was deported, he was probably, 30-something?
Because he was,
No.
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 he came for our wedding, so
Yeah, he came
I think
to our
he was in his mid-twenties.
Yeah.
Is he still in Germany?
Yeah.
Tell them to come for us to work.
Yeah, he could come now.
Actually, no. He can't. He can't.
Why can't he, when all the others just
I think he came now.
walk over? He has to make his citizenship. He doesn't want to come now. He's been there so long.
Yeah, well, he's worked a job over there, and so if he does just a couple more years over there, he gets their Social Security, and then can apply for the Social Security that he earned here. No, he's not allowed over here. Yeah. There's more to the story than that, but still, he's not allowed to come over here. Yeah.
Then he went back to Germany, he couldn't speak German.
Yeah, I just said that. Yeah, he had to go back to school 2 times. But, our citizenship isn't here either. It's not, Paul.
I just wanted to ask you, could you clarify and define antediluvian?
Antediluvian, in a general term, means ancient peoples, but in this context, it's referring to those people that lived before the flood. Okay. So we have a heavenly citizenship, and so we're always going to be the oddballs. If we're living our Christian life, we're going to alienate those people around us very often. They're not going to want to fellowship with us. Notice in verse 13 we have the word earth. Verses 14 and 16a uses the word country, and verse 16b uses the word city. The words country and city can be used interchangeably because a country was viewed as an extension of its royal city. So when you think of the Babylonian Empire, well, of course you think of Babylon proper. You think of the great city of Babylon. The Hanging Gardens. One of the seven wonders of the world. And of course that city reflected the country, and vice versa. And so what is the United States? What does our royal city say about us? Lots of gridlock. Yeah. Well, it's amazing. It's a beautiful city in a way, but having been up there a couple times, you get out of it a little bit, and then you see the realities of life, where there's probably a guy laying there in every gutter, in every corner, in every subway stairwell. I mean, it's just. That's the congressman, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's.
That's what leadership will do.
Yeah. We got to go underground and walk miles and miles and miles of underground tunnels that connects the entire city together. And that way these politicians can get from point A to point B without going in the public. That's how they get around. And so we had special permission to be down there, and I was wearing dress shoes. Oh, my feet hurt. I mean, golly, they hurt. I mean, I could sit here and talk about my aches and pains all day long. But anyway, they hurt. So we're walking, and I'm just like, oh, man, I hope this ends soon. I hope this ends soon, And then the tour guide says, oh, wait a minute, we went the wrong way. We got to go back again, And so I'm walking with Roscoe. Most of you know Roscoe, right? Pastor Roscoe. And who comes around the corner? Nancy Pelosi. He says, hey, Nancy. And she did not look up. She did not smile. She didn't say hello. Just, mean look. And they say, hey, I just saw Nancy. Did you see Nancy? I'm like, no, I'm too worried about my feet, man. But anyway, yeah. Anyway. Even today as Christians, we, like Father Abraham, seek a better home, a city that has been prepared for us. Probably, I only usually do it during certain funerals, but one of my favorite funeral passages is where Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are actually many rooms," is the proper translation. There are many rooms in my Father's mansion. And he says, and I go to prepare you a room, and and then I'm going to come back for you. And he says, and if I tell you this, then it's true. That's what I'm. And so we each have our own room. Can you imagine what your room is going to be like? What God?
My whole life, I have never had my own room. That would be amazing.
Really?
As a baby in a crib with my parents, I always shared at the most 4 sisters in a room because there was 9 of us. I moved out now in an apartment with my sister. I got married. I had to share it with my husband. So anyway.
Don't you have a couch?
I told Shelley, well, at nighttime I'm going to still sneak on over to her room. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. So verse 17. By faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. Even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned, Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead. And figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. So as far as Abraham's intention was concerned, he did sacrifice Isaac. I mean, they built he built an altar. I think Isaac had to carry the firewood, and he strapped him down there. And
Isaac first wanted to know where's the animal that they were going to sacrifice.
right.
That would be tough.
And for the gold star tonight, how old was Isaac?
An adult.
Teenager,
My goodness.
10, 12.
No, he was an adult. He was adult already.
18.
That's what the Bible.
He was an adult.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. He was an adult. I have to go back and check that out again, but you get the gold star. Because you gave the right answer and you gave it first. But remember that gold star can be taken away from you at any time.
That isn't fair. Once you give something that belongs to them, you can't take it back.
Okay, Pat.
Wrong classroom, sorry.
Yeah. So, as far as it goes, I mean, he was going to sacrifice his son. I mean, God was testing Abraham, albeit the word here, tested or tried, depending on your translation, in the Greek is tempted. And, everybody usually gets real confused at this point. Well, God doesn't tempt, right? Because Satan is the tempter. So people get really confused here what's going on. Since Satan cannot do anything without God's permission, and since God is never, ever, ever the author of sin or evil, we must understand that God's testing and Satan's tempting is one and the same. Okay? If God is doing it, we usually say he's testing. We're being tested. If Satan's doing it, we say that Satan is tempting us, okay? The primary difference is that Satan usually tempts us to sin, whereas God tests us to prove something. Whoa. God already knows us infinitely better than we know ourselves. So the purpose of testing us is to prove a point to ourselves or maybe to someone else, not to him. God knows your heart, right? He knows you better than you know yourself. Yes.
Okay, if Satan's tempting is the same as God's testing, it sounds like it's contradicting that God tests us to prove something and Satan tests.
Yeah, but we know that God throughout Scripture, and we see it a lot in the Old Testament, uses evil to thwart evil. He uses evil, right? He didn't create evil, but he uses evil, okay? And, and a lot of people say, well, if God created everything good, then where did evil come from, okay? Well, I think that, in my view, is that, I might even actually touch on this on Sunday a little bit, but, Satan was originally Lucifer. He was the light bearer. Think about the beauty of that name, Lucifer. Beautiful name. And he was the most beautiful angel, unbelievably intelligent. He was wise. God made him perfect.
Not wise enough.
I was just saying that.
Gave him free will.
Yeah.
He wanted more.
Well, he gave him everything that he wanted, but yeah, I think he wanted more. It's just like us. We all have different gifts. And, you have gifts I don't have, I might have a gift you don't have, or some of us, we might have the same gifts, but we manifest that gift in different ways. And so we wonder, well, how come God didn't give me that gift? Or how come he can do it better than me, or she can do it better? I must have displeased God. That's our first thought. We displease God, right? So then what we do is we try to, please God. We pray. We go in these elaborate prayers, and we try to please God. But you know what? We still don't get what we want. And so then we ultimately come to the conclusion, well, if I didn't do something wrong, then God must have made a mistake. And see, that's the conclusion we come up with. God must have made a mistake, you see, or that's what Satan thinks. And so he became prideful, right? Well, I can do it as good or better than God, right? God made a mistake, right? And so, he became prideful, and that is the foundation of all sin, right? Satan's called the first murderer. He's called the father of lies. I mean, he just, he's called the Lord of the Flies even, right? Beelzebub, he's called every name of the book, the dragon, everything, And so, but God uses evil because it's here now. I mean, it's a fact. One day, evil will be vanquished, right? He's going to lock Satan and his entourage up for 1,000 years, for the millennium. And then he'll be loosed for a short season, which it's going to look like things are going to start all over again, with all the stuff. But then will come judgment, the lake of fire. And so then he'll be permanently put into the lake of fire, and that'll be the end of it, as far as we're concerned, But yeah, God uses evil, right? Hey, don't we use evil too? We use evil.
Give us an example.
Well, I'm sure our national leaders have gone to bed with other foreign leaders, figuratively speaking, that are bad people because we have a common enemy. And we do that all the time. We compromise, right? We compromise and, yeah.
So you have some generals, they give everything away to the other country just to get money.
Yeah, but we do compromise, And sometimes in life you you got to determine, where will I compromise and where will I not compromise, If you have two groups and you're trying to be the arbitrator between the two groups that are arguing, well, if you encourage them to compromise, now both groups are going to be unhappy. If one group wins, then they'll be happy, the other group will be ticked off. If that one wins, then they'll be happy and the other one will be ticked off, And so really it's not about you getting your way or you getting your way, it's about God getting his way, right? As Christians, we're here to seek the perfect will of God. But nevertheless, throughout life, a good example would be Joseph in Genesis. He was taken into Babylon. He was recognized, him and his friends, for being, exceptional young men, very intelligent. They were right away cast into the, into the astrologer caste, and became one of the, with the wise men. And they were trained. They had to learn how to speak in that dialect. They couldn't speak in their Hebrew dialect. They had to learn how to read and write in that, in that way they did it. They had to learn astronomy. They had to learn mathematics. They had to learn all this, really relearn everything in their life. And they even changed their names. They even lost their identities, right? They were, what was it? Shadrach, Meshach, and
Indigo.
Yeah, yeah. I never can spell.
it's properly pronounced Abednego. Okay? Yeah. And so anyway, but they had their names changed, right? And but when they wanted to give them food from the king's table, they said, Why? Because that violated their religion. So they knew when to compromise, but they also knew when not to compromise. So we do it. We do it in life, and that's just the way it is. Abraham's act of faith was incredible, considering that God had already given him the promises of inheritance and children beyond number through Isaac. That's Genesis chapter 21. Apparently, the Phoenicians practiced a mystical ritual sacrifice whereby a prince in his royal attire would sacrifice his only son. And you might wonder, well, hey, the Phoenicians did that. They must have got it from somewhere. Who do they get it from? Scholars generally believe that the tradition came down from Esau. Okay, so Abraham did this to Isaac, and then Isaac told his boys about it. And Esau, later the father of the Edomites, and the Phoenicians, then of course he told them about what his ancestor had done. And so they began doing it as a tradition. Let's kill the firstborn son, right? God nowhere in the Mosaic law allowed human sacrifices, though he did claim the firstborn of Israel to be his own. In verse 19, while Abraham could not have understood God's request, he knew that it was within God's power to raise Isaac from the dead. Yeah, he couldn't understand it, but he knew that God was good to his word. So he didn't know, but he figured that, just obey, right? Faithfully obey. Couldn't understand it. Yeah, if you look at the internet, there's a lot of different pictures of Isaac, and some of them have him as a little boy, and all this stuff. But no, he was already late 20s, 30, mid 20s to 30. After all, God was the creator of the universe, and Abraham was as good as dead. Remember we read that earlier, a couple weeks ago, because of his age. But God was able to rejuvenate his body, was able to rejuvenate Sarah's dead womb. And, can you imagine the man at 100 and the woman was, 90? Having a baby? Man, I'd like to see that. Not really, but yeah. Okay. Verses 20 through 22, by faith Isaac spiritually blessed Jacob and Esau in Genesis 27. In this case, a prophetic foretelling of particular blessings that they would partake of. Often prophecy in Scripture is written in the present tense as if it had already been fulfilled, because God's promises are as good as done. Okay? If God says it, it's as good as done. So they don't necessarily put it in the future tense, they put it in the present tense. Yeah. Even if Moses wrote it after the fact, he would have wrote it in the past tense. But it's written in the present tense as an ongoing, continuous thing. Here, Jacob was listed first because Isaac preferred the younger over the older. Against tradition, right? Likewise, Jacob, also known as Israel, blessed both of Joseph's sons before he died. Jacob didn't know Joseph's sons by sight, but he did distinguish them by faith, because he transposed his hands intentionally so that he laid the right hand on Ephraim the younger and his left hand on Manasseh the older. So they kneeled down before him, and he was going to lay hands on them, and when he realized who they were, he switched hands. Is that important today that we lay our hands on our kids and pray a blessing upon them? Yeah, I think it's more important today than ever before that we should do that. Yeah. Jacob was also adopted grandsons as Jacob also adopted his grandsons as his own after having transferred the right of primogeniture, which is the right as the eldest son to inherit double or all of an estate of one or both parents. So basically, remember, Joseph was out of the picture. He thought he was dead. So he was kind of written off as dead. And so now that he's reunited with Joseph, Joseph is infinitely wealthier. What are you going to leave him? What are you going to leave Howard Hughes in your will? Not much, right? Because, he's got it all, right? That's a little outdated, Howard Hughes, but Bill Gates or somebody, whatever, okay? So, what are you going to leave him? I mean, you can't leave him nothing. They got everything. They own everything, So what did he do? He adopted his sons, and he passed that legacy on through them. He did this as an expression of gratitude because Joseph promised him that he would be buried in Canaan, and this reflected God's promise of Canaan to his descendants. So, if you remember, 400 years later at the Exodus, right? One of the things that the Israelites took out of Egypt with them, besides all their gold, remember that? Isn't that good? They went door to door for a handout, and the Pharaoh said, give it to them. Just give it to them. Whatever they want, give it to them, One commentator wrote down that they took so many tons of pure gold, but actually it was not pure. God taught the Israelites how to refine the gold purer than the gold they took from Egypt. But anyway, it's another story. But where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so they took the gold with them, but they also took the bones of Joseph and Jacob, right? Took their bones with them, right? Jacob and his grandsons leaned upon Jacob's staff. Now, some believe it was Joseph's staff, okay? But most scholars believe, no, it was Jacob's staff. He did so to praise and or pray to the Lord for his ongoing favor. The staff in this case was symbolic of their pilgrimage to the heavenly city. So it's the journey that keeps on going, right? The journey is not Egypt, the destination, or it's not Canaan land. It's heaven. Whereas the Roman Catholic Church contends that this was Joseph's staff. The top of it symbolized his power, and that Jacob and his two grandsons were worshiping Joseph through the staff scepter, or scepter. So, if you remember back in whether it was the Babylonian or the Persian Empire, the king or the reigning king at the time, would always have a scepter. And, if you had to have an appointment to see the king, if you came without an appointment, it could mean your death. So when you approach, with Esther, exactly. King Ahasuerus, right? So that was the Persian Empire. So anyway, so you approach the king, in line with everybody else, and if you're on the list, good. If not on the list, but what he would do is he would, if he accepted you either way, he would lift up his scepter, and I think you touch the scepter or kiss the scepter or whatever like that, and that was supposed to, demonstrate his power, and just like the popes today also have a rod. They have a ring, but they also have a rod or staff or whatever that they symbolize. Yeah. And so, again, that's what they're promoting, that they were worshiping Joseph through the staff or scepter. Jacob and Joseph are additional examples of those whose faith was no less strong at death than it was in life. Right to the very end, faithful. The faith of Moses. Hebrews 11:23. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of great value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who was invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. So by faith, Moses' parents, Amram and Jochebed, hid the baby, Moses, because they saw that he was no ordinary child. Some translations say that he was a fair child. Some say that he was a comely child. Basically, that means that he was uncommonly attractive. He was a really, really just good-looking baby, you know. I mean, if you look at how a lot of the Jews look, you know, and you know, wow, look at this, man. We got a good one here, you know. Well, I noticed in Israel, you know, the men that wear the black suits and the hats and the, you know, those are the Orthodox Jews, you know, and they're ugly. They're ugly.
Now you see why Charleston Heston got the role.
Yes. You know what? I was thinking of that. I was thinking of that very same thing. You know,
When they are a child, they are a good. Yeah.
I've seen some good-looking Jewish people.
Yes, I did too.
I'm over exaggerating a little bit, but go with the flow here now. Just go with the flow, okay? You know, big noses, you know, big pubed out looking ugly, you know, beards, you know, ugly men, you know, big thick glasses, you know. But their women are hot. Women are gorgeous.
It just depends.
Will you go along with me and just, you're going to lose that gold star, whatever, regardless of what Pat says, you're going to lose that gold star.
I challenge you, take it.
You go on the internet, you look them up, see what they look like, and look at their wives. Look at their wives. I didn't say every wife. I said look at their wives. They're hot because it's prearranged. That's the way they do it. They prearrange the marriages, and they do whatever they can to promote them to have kids.
What do they do with the ugly women?
Throw them out of the Palestinians, I guess. I mean, I don't know. But, you know, they're trying to build their population. They can build more settlements. They can, you know, they can take more land, you know, which is their land anyway, right? But what they do is they really try very, very hard to, you know, for especially that group, to have as many kids as possible, because they want to keep their lines pure, you know. They don't mind taking in, you know, Russian Jews and African Jews and whatever. They'll take them all in. But they really want that pure line, and they get paid. The more kids they have, the more money they get, and that's why, because of what they are, they make money. They don't really have to work, but they do because it looks good to have a job. So a lot of them do get into being jewelers and bankers and, you know, whatever like that. It's just extra money for them, but. I went to, I don't know if it was a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. I didn't actually go to it, but I was at the hotel where they had one. And we were waiting for the bus to come to pick us up. And I'm telling you, I never saw, I mean, I've been to some fancy stuff in my life, but I never saw nothing like this. But man, when the doors opened, man, these guys came in with these tall hats, man, big fur hats, man, and, you know, unbelievably dressed walking in. The women, the little girls that were dressed, every one of them was dressed like princesses with crowns. It was unbelievable. I mean, you would think that this was a royal thing going on here. I was just amazed. So anyway, what does that have to do with the lesson? Nothing. Oh yeah, he was a good-looking kid. Good to the eye, and comely or fair means also well-proportioned, And his parents saw him and said, "You know what, man? God's done something with this kid here. There's something special about him, and we can't now give him up to be killed." Basically. They were not afraid of the Pharaoh, or at least not afraid of his edict, which was to kill all the male Israelites that were born during a particular period of time. Moses grew up, and by faith he rejected his royal upbringing, even though he could have possibly ascended to the throne of Egypt. But he chose to suffer with his people, as a slave, and to relate to them. That's something. That's something. Almost out of time. Faith made Moses want to be adopted into the family of God and to serve the yet unseen King of Kings, the Lord Jesus Christ. So he knew that promise. He knew of that promise, that seed promise. And he said, I want to be part of that group, not part of this group. The luxury and prestige of Egypt's royal palace in of itself was not evil, but it represented the riches of the world at the expense of human flesh. And Egyptian polytheism was satanic, and they worshipped at the expense of the human soul. We're going to stop there. Let me just throw something at you real quick. I mentioned it before, but it's easy to forget. A lot of scholars have wondered, how is it that Joseph was a hero? He was just under the Pharaoh. He was the high prefect of all Egypt. He was a hero. They would have worshipped him like he was the man, okay? And, he set up his family into the best land, the land of Goshen, which is all fertile and, good for farming. And how is it that in 400 years, no one knew Joseph anymore? Wasn't his name put on obelisks? And, remember he did the famine thing? How they did all that? And people had food for the famine, and then they sold so much to other countries, they got rich like heck, And it's just like, how could they forget Joseph? And how could they forget these people over? Those are his people. And then make them slaves. I know we got to stop. Yes?